The world was shrouded in shadow, and the year was 890. The Holy Land, sacred to three great faiths, had become a battleground not only of men but of celestial forces. Wars raged, kingdoms fell, and the faithful prayed desperately for salvation. It was in this time of turmoil that whispers began of an unholy darkness spreading across the land. Villages fell silent overnight, their people vanished or found lifeless with expressions of unspeakable horror. Famine and pestilence followed the shadow's path, as if the earth itself recoiled from its touch. The clergy called it the adversary, Satan incarnate, walking the earth to claim dominion over God's creation. The darkness had gathered its strength at Armageddon, the hill of Megiddo, the prophesied site of the final battle. Only one man answered the call to stand against it, Sir Reynard of Arbroath, the last knight of an ancient and forgotten order. He bore the scars of countless battles, both earthly and unearthly. His armor was dulled by time, his sword chipped and worn, but his faith was unyielding. It was this faith that carried him to Megiddo, where the fate of humanity would be decided. Reynard arrived at the hill under the light of a crescent moon. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur, and the ground was scorched black, as if it had been burned by the fires of hell itself. At the summit, he found a desecrated altar, its surface smeared with blood and ash. There, waiting for him, was the figure he had dreaded his entire life. Satan. The Prince of Darkness stood tall and terrible, his form shifting between that of a man, a beast, and a shadow. His eyes burned like twin suns, and his voice, when he spoke, was a symphony of temptation and despair. "Welcome, knight," Satan said, his tone mocking yet strangely inviting. "You have traveled far, but you are too late. This land is mine, as is your world. Bow to me, and I may yet spare you." Reynard gripped the hilt of his sword, its crossguard shaped like a crucifix. "The world belongs to the Almighty, and I am his servant. You will not take it while I still draw breath." Satan laughed, a sound that shook the very ground. Bold words for a broken man. "But no matter. I shall take great pleasure in crushing you." With a wave of his hand, the demon summoned his minions, twisted abominations with blackened skin, jagged claws, and eyes that burned with unholy fire. They poured forth from the shadows, snarling and howling as they closed in on Reynard. The knight raised his sword, the runes etched into its blade glowing faintly. "In the name of God Almighty, I defy you." The horde descended upon Reynard, their claws slashing and teeth gnashing. But the knight stood firm, his blade a whirlwind of silver light. He moved with the precision of a lifetime of training, each strike cutting through the darkness as if the sword itself were a shard of divine wrath. The beasts fell one by one, their bodies disintegrating into ash and smoke. But for every one Reynard slew, two more seemed to take its place. Satan watched from atop the altar, his expression one of cruel amusement. "You cannot win, knight. This is not a battle, it is a prelude to your despair." Reynard ignored the taunts, focusing on the rhythm of combat. His breath came in ragged gasps, his muscles burned, but he pressed on. He had no illusions about victory. He was but a man, and his enemy was the embodiment of evil. Yet he fought not for himself, but for the countless souls that would be lost if he failed. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes, it was impossible to tell in the hellish chaos. When the last beast fell, Reynard collapsed to one knee, his sword trembling in his hand. Satan descended from the altar, his cloven feet leaving scorch marks on the ground. "Impressive," he said. "But futile. You have delayed the inevitable, nothing more." Reynard forced himself to his feet. "Then I will delay you until the end of time, if need be." Satan raised his arms, and the sky itself seemed to split apart. Thunder roared, and lightning struck the earth with blinding fury. From the rift in the heavens poured legions of demons, their forms shifting and grotesque. At their head was a monstrous figure clad in blackened armor, wielding a blade of fire. Reynard steadied himself, his faith his only shield against the overwhelming dread. He whispered a prayer, and his sword flared to life, its glow now brighter than ever. The knight charged into the fray, his blade cutting a path through the demonic ranks. Each swing of his sword was accompanied by a burst of holy light, searing the flesh of his enemies and scattering them like leaves in the wind. But the demons were relentless, their numbers endless. Reynard's armor was dented and scorched, his shield shattered. His strength waned, and he knew he could not last much longer. As the fiery blade of the demon general descended upon him, Reynard raised his own sword to meet it. The clash sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Reynard emerged from the melee bloodied and broken, but alive. The demon general lay in smoldering ruin, its fiery blade extinguished. Satan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Enough of this charade. You have proven your mettle, knight, but you cannot defeat me. I am eternal. I am inevitable." Reynard raised his sword, though his arms trembled with the effort. "You may be eternal, but so is God's love. And that is what I fight for." The Prince of Darkness roared, his form growing larger and more monstrous. He lunged at Reynard, his claws raking the air, his wings blotting out the moon. The knight met him head-on. The battle that followed was beyond mortal comprehension. The earth quaked, the sky burned, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp under the weight of their struggle. Reynard fought with everything he had, his every strike fueled by the prayers of the faithful and the hope of humanity. But Satan was a foe unlike any other. His power was vast, his malice unending. Each blow he landed sent waves of agony through Reynard's body, and each strike of the knight's sword seemed to barely wound him. Finally, with a mighty blow, Satan knocked Reynard to the ground. The knight's sword flew from his grasp, embedding itself in the scorched earth several feet away. "You are finished," Satan said, towering over him. "Kneel, and I may yet grant you mercy." Reynard looked up at his enemy, his vision blurred, his body broken. But his spirit remained unyielding. He crawled toward his sword, his lips moving in silent prayer. As Satan raised his claw to deliver the final blow, Reynard seized his sword and drove it into the ground. The runes on the blade blazed with a light so pure and intense that it pierced the darkness like the dawn of creation. The ground beneath them split apart, and a column of divine light erupted from the earth, engulfing Satan and Reynard both. The Prince of Darkness screamed, his form writhing as the light consumed him. Reynard felt his strength fading, his body dissolving into the light. But he felt no fear, only peace. He whispered one final prayer. "Lord, may my sacrifice be enough to save them." The light expanded, washing over the battlefield and banishing the darkness. When it faded, there was nothing left of Satan or Reynard, only the charred remains of the altar and the quiet hum of the wind. The Holy Land was saved. The darkness that had threatened to consume it was gone, and the people returned to their homes, their faith renewed. Though Sir Reynard of Arbroath was never seen again, his sacrifice became legend. Pilgrims came to Megiddo to honor the place where a single knight had faced the embodiment of evil and triumphed. And in the hearts of all who heard his story, the light of his faith continued to shine, a beacon of hope in the face of even the greatest darkness.